religion is a huge topic, one that I'm very much fascinated in. The questions foremost on my mind, as a therapist, what is the relationship between religion and mental health? Can religion help or hinder mental health? And if so, how does it do this? Now, with any of these things, there's two ways of going about answering these questions. And one is through evidence, like going through the statistics for each religion and comparing them for like suicide rates, longevity, socioeconomic status, level criminality, reported happiness, and so on. Which on the surface might seem like a good approach, but it quickly runs into all sorts of complications. For example, on average, Jews have the highest per capita income. But does greater income mean greater mental health? Would it greatly reduce the poverty of the world if everyone just decided to convert to Judaism tomorrow? And I think most people would agree, just in the face of it, that drawing conclusions like that is just kind of silly, as there are hundreds of other factors going on that impact these statistical measures, and they're not necessarily related to either mental health or to religion. Just to give you an example, I was reading a South Korean study on various religions and mental health, and it found that atheists reported a lower prevalence of anxiety than religious people. But it also reported that atheists were more likely to be alcoholics as well, and less anxiety, but more likely to be an alcoholic. It's it's a bit conflicting there. And also some people have pointed out to high rates of divorce among American atheists, but they don't kind of point out that atheists in other countries, they often have equal or lower rates of divorce to religious people, suggesting that there's a lot more going on here beneath the surface. And also a question of like how religious is a person, like a person who goes to church every week versus one that goes to church just Christmas or Easter, or maybe doesn't even go to church but is always active in the community. Well, some are more religious than others, or are they? Does that play a role into it? Because some people are just kind of casual, and other people will debate people online like, you're wrong about my religion. And so that's a factor that needs to be taken into account, and any kind of survey you do is just going to completely miss that layer of depth of what's actually happening there with the person. So in short, statistical evidence to compare is just not up to scratch on this, and I don't put a lot of faith in it, no pun intended, unless they have like huge sample sizes and the metric is at least something that's objectively verifiable, like life expectancy or suicide rates, as opposed to things like reported rates of happiness and anxiety, which you don't really know if that means anything, and for all you know, it might be good for you to have more anxiety, and in life it's not always that simple. Because, not having enough anxiety/fear is not necessarily a healthy thing to do. Sometimes a healthy reaction is to be afraid, to be anxious, so to speak. But another way of examining this mystery, though, is using our reason and going through various ideas in our heads and to see how different religious beliefs can impact a person's mental health. And so in my last video, I talked about a concept found in Buddhism, how it is hazardous to be overly emotionally invested in a certain outcome. Now, Christianity has a similar concept to Buddhism, but I mentioned Buddhism because Buddhism is based almost all around this concept. It's at the very core of Buddhism. While in Christianity, this concept is not so much front and center, but it's inferred from Jesus shunning materialism and hedonism and advocating a humble attitude to life and giving thanks for what you have. But this creates a complicated issue because, if we want to try and compare Buddhism and Christianity, they are so complicated. There's so much in there. They are very similar in some ways, but they are very different in other ways. And for the purpose of this discussion, if I were to bring up like a mainstream religion like Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, or so on, it creates a bit of a problem because a lot of people have kind of set ideas about what these religions are, whether they're good or bad, or whether they like them, or they're true or false, or whatever. And these kind of prejudices can make it difficult to hear an idea about whether mental health and religion have anything to do with each other. So I thought, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to look at a religion that a lot of people may not even consider to be a religion. In fact, many people would consider the religion I'm about to talk about, the faith I'm about to talk about, to be a New Age religion, or a New Age cult, or just a cult, whatever those terms mean for those people. But I wanted to focus on on something that wasn't part of the mainstream, just because hopefully the audience wouldn't have a lot of information, they wouldn't be very prejudiced by what they've previously heard about it. So the religion in question that I want to focus on is one that I encountered over 20 years ago when I was involved in the environmental conservation movement. It was generally called Gaia theory by the adherents, and related to this idea that Gaia was a unified living organism made up of all the life on Earth. Kind of how the human body is made up of billions of individual cells, each alive in their own right. The different species of life are analogous to the different organ tissues in our bodies. So when they call the Amazon rainforest the lungs of the Earth, they mean it in a more literal sense than a metaphorical sense that we might be used to. So many people would say that Gaia theory is a modern incarnation of the Mother Earth deity, and the adherents worship the Earth and judge whether behavior is right or wrong in relation to the impact it has on Gaia, or the Earth, and her ecological systems, which are really her body and her organ systems. But a few years ago, I found out there's a schism taking place among the adherents of Gaia theory. They're kind of split off into two denominations, so to speak. And the schism is in relation to how humanity is perceived in relation to Gaia. These two denominations were related to me as being dark Gaia and light Gaia accordingly, although I suspect the adherents of dark Gaia would protest being labelled as such, so you can tell what kind of person I was talking to about this. Anyway, so dark Gaia adherents view humanity as a disease, something like a virus or a cancer that's invading, infecting, metastasizing the Earth, or Gaia. Cities are, in a sense, large tumours, land clearings for agriculture are open wounds, and the carbon emissions are toxins that are being released into Gaia's bloodstream, poisoning her. The goal of dark Gaia adherents is an environmental movement that aims to massively reduce human population, roll back industrialization, and return to an ecological relationship with nature akin to subsistence farming. Now, in opposition to this is light Gaia. Light Gaia postulates that Gaia is so powerful, she could wipe out humanity at any time if she wished. So the fact that we're still here suggests that, well, Gaia wants us to be here. And so she created humanity to serve her for a purpose that we are ignorant of, or mostly ignorant of, because we are essentially just part of her, doing her bidding subconsciously. Therefore, humanity is as much a part of Gaia as your kidneys and your liver are a part of you. And the argument they have for this position is really fascinating. So they'll point out the carbon dioxide atmosphere in the atmosphere is actually plant food. And plants need a certain amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in order to live, somewhere around 150 parts per million. However, over time, as forests grow and get buried underground, the carbon dioxide that was in the atmosphere has been extracted from the atmosphere by the trees and it's been buried. And that becomes fossil fuels like coal and oil. And this is slowly choking the planet to death, choking Gaia to death. Now, 500 million years ago, the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere was 4,000 parts per million. But these declined over that period to only 180 parts per million in the last major ice age 2 million years ago. At this point, the CO2 in the atmosphere was so low that all plant life on Earth almost died out. But then miraculously, or perhaps as part of Gaia's divine plan, humanity appears out of this ice age and starts setting fire to forests and releasing carbon back into the atmosphere for, to nourish plant life. And then later humanity starts to dig up all the coal, all the oil, and burning it, and thus replenishing the carbon content of the atmosphere. And thus begins the process of heralding a new age of ecological resurgence due to start in the next few centuries because of the increasing carbon content in the atmosphere. In light of this view of humanity, the goal of light Gaia, or the adherents of light Gaia, is not to harm humanity, but to reduce the negative impacts of humanity by reducing the production of non-carbon pollutants that are poisonous to life, like lead, radioactive elements, sulfur dioxide, fluoride, and other heavy industrial compounds. Also to create large natural reserves for wildlife, green up the cities, and stabilize human population growth. Now, as a therapist, what's fascinating about these two different denominations of Gaia theory is they appear to have different impacts on a person's mental health. In psychotherapy, we often talk about a concept called self-esteem. And while that's a big topic in itself and deserves several videos on it alone, suffice it to say that self-esteem refers to how favorably you view yourself. If you see yourself as a good person, then there should be more of you in the world. So having children is an act of charity for the world, so having more self-esteem is generally considered to be a good thing. While if you lack self-esteem and see yourself as stupid, evil, worthless, and you tend to be miserable, depressed, and into self-harming behaviors, because it's kind of a reward to hurt yourself because you're bad, so you're going to punish yourself because you're so bad. And not wanting children so much because if you're a bad person, then having children is an act of vandalism against the world. Now, in Dark Gaia theory, the adherents see humanity as a worthless disease infecting the earth, and thus anything that harms humanity is a good thing. Anything that reduces human population, be it a pandemic or a political propaganda promoting childless marriages, or indirectly works of fiction constantly depicting humanity as the disease, the bad guys that needs to be gotten rid of, these are all valid means of proselytizing the Dark Gaia faith. When it comes to self-esteem, this is problematic to the adherent for Dark Gaia because being a human themselves, or he or she, himself, herself, he or she has to accept that they are part of the problem and needs to be dealt with the rest of humanity. This usually plays out into either a suicidal life trajectory of self-destruction or perhaps more disturbingly, into a zealous trajectory of, because I recognize that I am the problem, that makes me special. And therefore I'm exempt from self-destruction, but I need to work to destroy other people in order to remain a good person. In other words, I am the only good person because I'm working against the interests of the rest of my race. Since it's another way of putting this view is since I'm on the bad guys team, then I'm only a good guy if I'm a traitor to my own team. Now, if we go back to the light Gaia viewpoint on this, you're a good person anyway. You're just born a good person. You are created by Gaia, and you are unwittingly doing what she wants you to do. And becoming more educated about Gaia is only going to help you become better at being a good person. It's about smoothing out your rougher edges. Some adherents of Gaia theory believe that Gaia wants humanity to develop missiles and nuclear weapons so that we can protect her from asteroid strikes that killed off the dinosaurs. So humanity is basically the immune system of the planet. This is completely compatible with a good sense of self-esteem, believing that you are a good person, with a purpose and meaning in life, and that by having more children and raising them well, you are making the world a better place. So here we have what I would call two denominations of the same religion having completely opposite impacts on a person's mental health. So much so that if I had a client come to me with depression and I found out that they were an adherent to Dark Gaia theory, I would engage them to consider the alternative viewpoints found in Light Gaia theory. Because adopting these more positive, life-affirming beliefs, they are still retaining their faith in Gaia theory, but in a way that's boosting their mental health, which is my interest as a therapist, rather than crippling it like Dark Gaia theory tends to do, or actually lead to some really negative, pathological viewpoints on the rest of humanity. Now, every religion is full of beliefs that affect mental health, and religions are also very internally diverse, so there's a lot of variation among Christians and Muslims and Jews and so on, and Buddhists. They've got lots of variation among them. And so they're typically a mixed bag, with some having a positive influence, or some beliefs having a positive influence on a person's mental health, and some having a negative influence on a person's health. And you can't necessarily predict from a person's stated religion what beliefs that they have that might be harmful or positive, affirming to their mental health. But what I hope I've done with this video is that I hope I've opened your mind to how religion and psychology interact with each other to promote different mental health outcomes in people. Anyway, that's it for today. If you liked the video, please like it, please share it, and subscribe if you want more. it really helps. Like the likes and the shares, they really help a lot. I really appreciate it. But anyway, that's it for now. Until next time, per aspera ad astra.